If you, like, buy a luxury sports car, drive it off the lot, and the engine immediately fails, you would demand a refund, right? You'd be furious.
Oh, absolutely.
But what if you spent, $4,000 on a purebred puppy that literally cannot breathe without surgical intervention? Society doesn't call that a scam. Society calls that exemplary pet ownership.
Yeah, it's a completely different standard.
Right. We pamper them. We buy them orthopedic beds, grain-free food, designer sweaters. We treat them like royalty and basically assume our massive financial investment is like proof of our devotion.
We do.
But what if that initial premise is completely backwards? What if paying top dollar for a highly sought-after purebred is actually the very first symptom of a massive, completely silent problem?
It's a profoundly uncomfortable question. I mean, we naturally equate our spending and our devotion with doing the right thing for the animal.
Yeah, we think money equals care.
Exactly. We assume that a high price tag correlates with biological quality and, a high quality of life. But when you strip away the pedigree papers and look at the sheer biological reality of the creature we are actually buying, that equation falls apart entirely.
And tearing apart that equation is exactly what we're getting into today. Our source material for this deep dive is a genuinely eye-opening document.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's titled Accanimento-genetico.pdf, authored by Niccolo Federico, and it's dated May 16, 2026. The mission of our deep dive today is to explore the incredibly high ethical cost of genetic selection in our pets.
Right.
We're going to unpack why our relentless human pursuit of the perfect animal, the perfectly squished face, the impossibly tiny body, the unique folded ear, might actually be destroying them from the inside out.
It's a heavy topic, but so necessary.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the title of the document itself, Accanimento Genetico. It's an Italian phrase, but the source makes it clear that it carries a very specific heavyweight.
It does, yeah. And understanding this phrase is the key that unlocks the entire document. If you read a veterinary textbook, you'll see terms like extreme artificial selection or maladaptive traits or simply inbreeding.
Just really clinical words.
Right, clinical words. They describe the mechanical process of breeding. But Accanimento Genetico is different. It's an ethical and rhetorical indictment. It translates roughly to a relentless, stubborn, almost obsessive genetic persistence.
It sounds like pushing something way past the point of logic, like you saw the warning signs miles back and just, kept the foot on the gas.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. It's the conscious act of pushing physical traits past the absolute limits of an animal's health and biological function, purely to satisfy a human aesthetic whim or to create a living status symbol.
Wow.
It is the insistence on continuing to breed for a specific look, even when the anatomical damage to the animal is undeniably obvious to everyone involved.
Which is horrifying when you remember we aren't talking about tweaking the design of a handbag, right?
Yeah.
We are talking about manipulating the bodies of living, sentient creatures.
Exactly. Living animals.
Let's make this abstract concept of relentless genetic persistence concrete.
Yeah.
The document dives straight into the real-world victims, and these are the exact dogs and cats dominating our social media feeds every single day. Let's talk about the brachycephalic breeds.
The flat-faced dog, so pugs, French bulldogs, English bulldogs. For generations, breeders have selectively chosen dogs with shorter and shorter muzzles.
Right.
But the biological mechanism of what happens when you do that is incredibly grim. Because when you breed a dog to have a crushed-in skull, the bony structure of the face shrinks, but the soft tissue inside the mouth and throat does not.
Wait, really? So all that tissue just gets crammed into a smaller and smaller stage?
Precisely. It creates a condition called brachycephalic airway obstructive syndrome. The soft palate literally blocks their airway. So when you see a pug making those quote-unquote cute snorting or snoring sounds, you are actually listening to an animal physically struggling for oxygen.
They are suffocating while just resting on the couch.
Yes. Add to that the fact that their eye sockets are bred to be so shallow that their eyes can easily suffer trauma, and, their crushed airways mean they can't pant effectively, making them incredibly vulnerable to fatal heat stroke.
There is a detail from the source regarding the English bulldog that just completely stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, the reproduction issues.
Yes. They have been altered so heavily, their heads bred to be so massive, and their hips bred to be so incredibly narrow, that they often cannot even give birth naturally anymore.
Right, it's physically impossible.
The mother's anatomy physically cannot accommodate the puppy's heads. They rely routinely on scheduled C-sections just to reproduce. We have quite literally engineered an animal that cannot naturally propagate its own species without human surgical intervention.
It is the ultimate maladaptive trait. But this obsession with morphing their anatomy isn't just about flattening faces. It's about pushing the skeleton to extremes in every direction.
Like the giant breeds.
Exactly. Look at the giant breeds, like the Great Dane. We've pushed their skeletal growth to the absolute maximum, resulting in terrible joint failures, bone cancer, and hearts that simply cannot pump blood efficiently to such a massive frame. It drastically shortens their lifespans.
And then you shrink the skeleton down to the absolute minimum with the miniatures, like the Chihuahuas, and you hit a completely different set of mechanical failures.
Exactly right. When you miniaturize a canine to that degree, you get extremely fragile bones that break from like a simple jump off a sofa. You also get severe dental crowding.
Right, because the teeth don't shrink.
Yep. Just like the soft tissue in the pug's throat. When you shrink the Chihuahua's jaw, the teeth don't magically shrink with it. They crowd, they rot, and they cause massive infections right in the skull.
And sometimes the skull itself is the failure point. The document specifically calls out the Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, which is just heartbreaking.
Yeah, that one is rough.
They are bred for this very specific, delicate, dome-like head shape. But again, the tissue inside doesn't match the bone outside. The skull is literally too small for the brain.
And that structural mismatch causes a neurological condition called syringomyelia. The brain is squeezed and essentially herniates into the spinal column, which obstructs the flow of spinal fluid.
Oh my God.
It creates fluid-filled cavities in the spinal cord. For the dog, it results in a life of chronic, agonizing, burning pain, all for a skull shape that looks good in a show ring.
That is just wow.
And you see similar structural collapses in the German Shepherd. Decades of showline breeding have selected for a severely sloped back. It's not just an angle, it's a deliberate weakening of the rear assembly that leads directly to severe hip dysplasia and lifelong difficulty in basic movement.
It's just wild to me that this genetic obsession isn't just a dog problem either. The source makes it clear we do the exact same manipulation to felines.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Persian cats. They're bred for that completely flat face, inheriting the same respiratory nightmares as pugs, plus chronic eye tearing and jaws so deformed they often have physical difficulty just picking up and chewing normal food.
Right.
But the example that really highlights the biological ignorance at play here is the Scottish fold.
Ah, yes. The Scottish fold perfectly illustrates a concept called pleiotropy.
Break that down, because this was fascinating to me.
Sure. So pleiotropy is when one single gene influences multiple, seemingly unrelated physical traits. The trademark look of the Scottish fold is, of course, those cute folded down ears.
Right, everyone loves those ears.
Well, breeders isolated the gene that causes that ear cartilage to collapse. But that gene doesn't just live in the ears, it is a systemic cartilage gene. The exact same mutation that weakens the ear cartilage is also building the cartilage in their ankles, their knees, and their spine.
Wait, so you literally cannot have the cute folded ear without fundamentally breaking the entire skeletal system. The cute ear is chemically synonymous with a broken body.
Precisely. It leads to severe bone deformities and chronic lifelong joint pain. You can't separate the aesthetic from the agony.
Going back to that sports car analogy from earlier, it's not just that the engine fails. It's like we're heavily modifying a luxury sports car to look incredible in a showroom, but we've completely sacrificed the engine. I mean, we are demanding the car be built entirely out of cheap, brittle plastic because we like the matte finish, and then acting surprised when the chassis snaps in half over a speed bump.
That's a great way to put it.
But what drives this? The source is pretty uncompromising about the market reality. Kennel clubs and feline clubs set these extreme aesthetic standards, and the fashion trends, celebrity ownership, and social media algorithms amplify them.
Yeah, they just feed the loop.
The brutal truth of the market is that extreme, exaggerated characteristics capture attention. They get more likes, and they confer a bizarre kind of elite status.
They really do. But the document does point out that the legal tides are slowly starting to shift. It notes that countries like the Netherlands and Norway have actually started introducing strict breeding restrictions.
Really?
Yes, and in some cases, outright bans on certain brachycephalic breeds. They've reached the conclusion that when breed standards inherently cause suffering, the ethical cost is simply too high for society to permit.
Which is a huge, necessary step. But honestly, reading all this biological reality, I found myself getting genuinely frustrated.
Understandably so.
And I have to play devil's advocate here for you, because I'm thinking about the people buying these animals. If someone is spending thousands of dollars on a French bulldog, hand feeding them, paying for expensive airway surgeries, letting them sleep in their bed, crying over them,
Yeah.
how can we possibly say they are the bad guys?
Right.
Aren't they demonstrating the ultimate love?
Yeah.
It feels like a massive contradiction.
It is the ultimate psychological paradox. And to dismantle that contradiction, the document asks us to face a really difficult story. Truth love does not automatically equal an understanding of biological needs.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, you can feel profound, genuine affection for an animal while simultaneously being completely neurologically blind to its suffering.
Neurologically blind. How does that actually happen?
It happens through a mechanism deeply embedded in our evolutionary wiring, something the famous ethologist Konrad Lorenz called the baby schema, or Kindchen schema.
The baby schema.
Yes. Human brains evolved to ensure the survival of our own species. We are literally hardwired to adore infantile traits. Huge, wide-set eyes, round faces, disproportionately large foreheads, tiny noses, and clumsy movements.
So when we see those features, our brain just completely overrides our logic.
Entirely. When you look at a human baby, those features trigger a massive release of dopamine and oxytocin in your brain. It induces an overpowering urge to nurture and protect.
Yeah, makes sense for babies.
But the problem is, our brains aren't smart enough to distinguish between a healthy human infant and a genetically deformed dog. We look at a pug with a crushed face and huge bulging eyes, and our brain floods with those exact same nurturing chemicals.
Wow.
Our empathy is essentially weaponized against the animal's health. We perceive those pathological signs of deformity as overwhelmingly cute. What induces tenderness in us happens to be biologically devastating for the animal.
That is deeply unsettling. We are chemically tricked into loving the very traits that are killing them. And the source mentions that this disconnect gets exponentially worse when you step into competitive show environments, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It goes beyond just dogs and cats.
Yes. In competitive environments, aesthetics and control become the singular, obsessive focus, and biological reality is completely erased. The document uses an incredibly powerful example to illustrate this. The African gray parrot, or Papagallo senorino.
Those are the highly intelligent birds that can mimic human speech, right?
Extraordinarily intelligent. But look at their biology. They are built to fly miles and miles every single day across the canopy. They live in large, incredibly complex social flocks.
Yeah.
They have deep cognitive and social needs that are vital to their mental health. Yet, in competitive breeding or show environments, what happens? They're often kept entirely isolated in tiny single cages.
Why? Just to keep them safe.
To protect their perfect plumage. If they interact with other birds, a feather might get bent or plucked, or, to meticulously control their diet and environment for breeding. The physical appearance or the genetic lineage is prioritized over everything else.
That's terrible.
The result is chronic boredom, neurotic behavior, and profound psychological torture for a creature that desperately needs constant cognitive stimulation and social interaction. The owner might truly believe they love the bird, but they have stripped away its fundamental ability to be a bird.
And the really scary part is how normal it all feels to the people involved in these communities.
Yeah. That is the power of normalization. The human brain is highly adaptable. It quickly normalizes whatever it sees frequently. If you go to dog shows and constantly see a certain breed gasping for air, or a cat whose eyes are perpetually weeping, your brain stops flagging it as distress.
It just becomes background noise.
Exactly. You adopt the community mindset. Oh, that's just how the breed is. The pathology simply becomes the new standard.
The document also talks about selective empathy, which connected a lot of dots for me. Humans are generally very good at reacting to obvious acute trauma. If a dog gets hit by a car and breaks its leg, we rush to the vet, we spend the money, we feel terrible.
Right.
But we are shockingly terrible at recognizing chronic stress, psychological deprivation, or normalized genetic defects.
Especially, and this is the crucial mechanism, if the animal masks the pain. Dogs and cats are eager to please.
Yeah.
If a dog with severe hip dysplasia still wags its tail, eats its food, and licks our face, we perceive them as happy.
Even when they're in agony.
Right. We accept their unconditional affection, completely unaware that they are suffering, and entirely ignoring the fact that we are the ones who intentionally demanded the genetic flaws causing their lifelong pain. If we connect this to the bigger picture, these animals effectively become a mirror for human psychology.
A mirror how? What do you mean?
Because we do this exact same thing to ourselves. We constantly value harmful aesthetic standards over health. We chase superficial status symbols. We adhere blindly to tradition, even when it hurts us. We simply project those deeply flawed human psychological mechanisms onto the animals we claim to care for. We mold their literal bones into the shape of our own vanity.
Wow. Okay, so having explored the absolute depths of this human-made genetic disaster, we have to pivot toward the antidote. Because if extreme human selection is the poison, then relaxing that grip has to be the cure, right? Does the document point to breeds that actually look and function like real animals?
It does. It details several alternatives breeds that are far less genetically manipulated and haven't been pushed to structural extremes for the sake of a show ring. Let's start with what are called primitive dogs. Breeds like the Basenji or the Shiba Inu.
They definitely look more like wild dogs.
Yeah.
Pointy ears, normal snouts.
Exactly. They have experienced much less invasive genetic selection. Their morphology, their physical structure remains much closer to their wild ancestors. Because they don't have extreme, exaggerated proportions, they simply don't suffer from the structural systemic failures of the highly manipulated breeds.
The source also highlights Nordic breeds, like Siberian Huskies and Alaskan Malamutes. And the mechanism there is really interesting because they were highly selected, but they were selected by the environment, not a kennel club.
Very true.
They had to survive incredibly harsh, freezing conditions and physically pull heavy loads. You simply cannot survive that environment if your genetics are compromised by extreme aesthetic quirks. So form follows function, giving them incredibly balanced functional structures.
Function is key. You also see that in working dogs, like border collies and Australian cattle dogs. They were bred by humans, but strictly for performance intelligence, endurance, the ability to herd sheep all day. Because the pressure was entirely on performance, their bodies had to remain healthy and structurally sound.
Though I will add the massive caveat the document provides, because these dogs are built to work, they need intense, constant activity. Putting a border collie in a small apartment with a sedentary lifestyle is just a different form of psychological cruelty.
Oh, absolutely. It's a terrible fit. And you see a similar principle of natural function in felines, too. The natural cats. Breeds like the European Shorthair or the Maine Coon.
Right.
They haven't been subjected to the extreme facial flattening or body shortening of the show cats. They have functional snouts, normal breathing, and robust bodies. But the source saves the ultimate biological solution for last. The absolute pinnacle of genetic health isn't a purebred at all. It's the mixed breed, the Metici.
Yes. This is where we get into the genetics of heterosis or hybrid vigor, right?
Yeah.
Explain how that actually works on a cellular level. Why is a mixed breed inherently healthier?
It comes down to how genetic diseases are inherited. Most of the severe genetic diseases plaguing purebreds are recessive. This means an animal has to inherit 2 copies of the mutated gene, one from each parent, to actually get the disease.
Okay, following.
When breeders close the stud book to keep a breed pure, they create a genetic bottleneck. They are essentially forcing a small pool of genes to recycle over and over. This guarantees that those recessive, diseased genes will eventually meet up and express themselves.
And mixing the breeds shatters that bottleneck.
Exactly. Mixed breeds have vast genetic variability. By opening up the gene pool, you introduce a flood of different, healthy, dominant genes. These dominant genes literally mask the recessive diseased genes. The biological rule is mathematically simple closed genetics plus extreme physical traits guarantees a high risk of disease. Broad genetic diversity plus natural functional selection equals robust health.
So mixed breeds are basically nature's ultimate financial strategy, like a highly diversified index fund. You're spreading out the genetic risk, whereas buying a highly inbred purebred is like putting all your life savings into one incredibly volatile meme stock.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
It might look flashy to your friends for a second, but a catastrophic crash is mathematically inevitable because there's no underlying stability.
What's fascinating here is the very existence of these robust, healthy mixed breeds completely destroys a common excuse. You'll hear breeders say that health problems are just an inevitable byproduct of domestication.
And it's not.
No, the biology proves that is a lie. The Basenji proves a dog can be domesticated and structurally perfect. The European Shorthair proves a cat doesn't need a flat face to live in our homes. The extreme suffering of the pug, the bulldog, or the Scottish fold is not a tragedy of nature. It is entirely 100% a human choice. We chose to make them suffer because we liked the way it looked.
Which brings us to the end of a pretty heavy, but I think incredibly necessary journey. We've taken you from the shocking, hidden realities of what our aesthetic demands have physically done to animals like the English Bulldog and the Cavalier King Charles Spaniel,
Yeah.
through the neurological trap of the baby schema that literally hijacks our brains,
Yeah.
making us confuse biological pathology with cuteness,
Yeah.
and finally, to the literal genetic salvation found in shattering those bottlenecks, letting form follow function, and embracing the robust health of mixed breeds. True love for an animal doesn't mean buying the most expensive, exaggerated purebred to show off. True love means prioritizing their biological needs and their fundamental right to simply be an animal. So what does this all mean?
I think it leaves us with a profound paradox about human nature to chew on. The document points out that our definition of what is quote-unquote cute or desirable isn't a fixed law of the universe. It is a culturally conditioned response.
Right.
We learned to find a squished face cute because society and marketing repeatedly told us it was a status symbol. But if human nature has the power to bend an animal's biology to fit our aesthetic will, do we have the willpower to bend our own perception?
That's the real question.
Exactly. Can you consciously train yourself the next time you scroll through social media or visit a shelter to look at a perfectly natural, functionally healthy, mixed breed animal and genuinely find that more aesthetically beautiful than the exaggerated manufactured traits of a purebred?
It's an incredible challenge. Can health become the new standard of beauty? Because at the end of the day, that premium price tag you pay for a pedigree isn't a measure of your love. Treating them like family means wanting them to take a full, deep breath of air without struggling. It means realizing that the greatest investment we can make in our pets isn't financial. It's refusing to buy into a system that breaks them in the first place.